Yes, Martin. So if you want to just give a little brief introduction about yourself, and then you can do the start the presentation.
Sure. Thank you. Let me just, yeah. So Vikram, thank you for inviting me to speak today. I'm going to cover a little bit of background in myself after a little while. So if that's okay, I'm going to do a couple of slides and then talk a little bit about myself. So what I was hoping to talk today about was the sort of the culture and the customs around ODR and online mediation. And I wanted to make it an interactive session as much as possible. Understanding it's a symposium, I've tried to provide a few more slides than I had originally planned. So I'm hoping that as we go through it, we can make it as interactive as possible. We're really talking about the future, the culture that we can create online through a set of activities, approaches, principles, and practices. While ODR has been around a few decades, it was really, when we went into COVID and everybody had to get on Zoom, there was no choice. And suddenly everybody sort of adapted to that. And I think everybody adapted pretty effectively. There's a number of tools like Crack have tools that they offer through their own website, and mediation rooms and eCom and ADR. There's a set of visual tools that people use like Muriel and Miro, and I have a tool. It's called Janus, and it's a sort of a data-driven question-based tool for mediators. So my hope is to make this a discussion, as I said, of those practices and how best to serve our clients and parties that have engaged us as mediators and help them resolve their challenges and build ADR. So before I do that, I just wanted to go through a little history of ODR. So and this is from one of the Ernst Cash, sort of did a great article. I provided the article and the link at the bottom there. So in 1966, the first article started to appear in the Law Review. The National Center for Automated Information Research started sponsoring conferences. There was some funding around some projects, and they used Otbund's office at University of Massachusetts and a family dispute ODR project in Maryland. So that was a few decades ago now, or 25 years. So then the Hewlett-Packard did funded some Massachusetts to establish this Center for Information Technology and Dispute Resolution. And there was a series of conferences over the next decade, including an international conference, which brought the whole world in. The court systems in the 90s were really struggling with sort of jurisdictional questions, like where is this event happening, which laws it is covered by. But those legal questions really weren't of interest to the people who were actually having disputes online. And it was really the driver for this was the disputes that were happening online, and people wanted to solve them online. So the majority of the situations were parties were in different places, and the land court systems really weren't a very useful option for those who felt aggrieved. So they split the there was some focus on offline processes and automation, but most of the focus went on disputes created online. And the eBay is the best example of that, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So early on, there were some disputes between university students, copyright issues, uploading software, downloading software. But the big event really happened, in 1999 when eBay asked University of Massachusetts, and this was this thing that got sponsored right at the beginning. Where was it? Yeah, the Amherst Center of Information and Technology and Dispute Resolution. They were asked to conduct a pilot. It was a very successful pilot, and in 2 weeks they had dealt with a couple of hundred disputes. And after that, basically, BSO had asked people, had built in, eBay built in dispute resolution into their processes. Like Colin Rule and Ethan Cash are sort of considered online dispute resolution, fathers of online dispute resolution, largely because of that, the impact from eBay. And he specifies that the new challenge post that is really finding tools that can deliver trust, convenience, and expertise for the very many different types of conflicts. So they obviously recognize that the online automated, sort of the almost automated, but simple interaction of parties to create in a very structured environment for eBay was able to bring millions of resolutions. But that's not always the case in many of the mediations that we're dealing with. It's a lot more complex than that. And so, we need tools for many different types of conflicts. So this is where I wanted to introduce myself. I've worked in the IT industry for 30 years on both sides of the contractual dispute, and in terms of both as a vendor and as a client. And I got pretty frustrated with the loss and the waste and dysfunction that I saw around me. And I thought it was related to systemic conflicts of people. So I went off back to university for a couple of years to study dispute resolution and be qualified as a mediator through the program at York University in Canada, in Toronto, or York. And then I launched a Neutral Advocate to build resolution and into business processes. So my feeling was that there was so much power. I really fell in love with the power of mediation, and the seeing people's innovation in conflict, and wanted to build that resolution into business processes. So our first MVP looked at solutioning through shared risk and agile contracts. This was very much a fixed solution, similar to what eBay had. Was it was very, very you custom built the solution basically for that particular scenario. And what we learned was that groups wanted to have negotiations and conversations in the way they wanted to have conversations. So we built a much more flexible no-code model for building any type of interactions. And so that's really where my interest in mediation is, and online mediation. It's trying to understand how mediation can adapt with the tools that are available online. So if I refer to this in this next slide, you'll see this is another a vendor of a product for retrospectives. So in the agile world, at the end of every piece of work, which is every 2 weeks or a month, the people sit together and they work through the issues that they've got. They identify things they want to start and stop and continue. And there's sort of a set workflow again, but it's very much online. It's very visualized. It's somewhat using data, although it's very much in a fixed manner. And so so if you see, in here, you'll see set the stage, gather data, generate insights, decide what to do. These are sort of fairly familiar will be fairly familiar to process design for mediation. And so you see excellent tools like this, but again, fairly fixed, creating an online experience for parties that is new and innovative, and people are engaged in it, and it works. So it's, they talk about a guided facilitation process. So I'm trying to understand how mediators can provide, so that technology online can support mediators being able to provide guided facilitation processes or guided mediation processes. So what I've done here is sort of draw out a flow that is a sort of typical interest-based flow that used for mediations, and so it's fairly typical. I'm not going to go through it in a lot of detail. That's why I'd like to explore it a little bit more later. But you see the stakeholder intake, the setting of the rules, the storytelling, the reflections, sharing of perspectives, building an agenda, an issues list, clarifying positions and interests, option gathering and decision frame, explore and test options, mutually build an agreement, and sign off your beneficial agreement. So the question is sort of which tools are the best tools to be able to facilitate that conversation, to really best engage the people when they're online, engage them in the process of finding a solution for themselves. And dialogue is obviously prime, and wherever we can use dialogue, it's great. But dialogue online sometimes feels a little disconnected, and to really engage people, there are some facilitation tools that can potentially help. So I think the key question that comes out of this discussion, so before I go on, you can have activities that are synchronous, like they're in a meeting, you're together, everybody else, and then you can have activities that are asynchronous, so you could do it before the meeting. You can actually have an asynchronous meeting, a set of actions during a meeting, so people are working on their own stuff, but they're co-located virtually, and you can have activities afterwards, and you can flow activities between all of these things, and we sort of do that naturally as we set up meetings, and we have different conversations for different purposes as we help resolve conflicts. And sometimes meetings are sort of offline and completely outside the sort of traditional processes, depending on how people define mediation. So I think what I wanted to talk and sort of ask questions about was, for when we're designing mediation processes, when is dialogue right and when is writing right? Like when do we want to bring in writing? What's the psychological impact that we want to have? Like, do we want to give them more thinking time? Do we want to have more interaction so it's dialogue? There's different characteristics around different ways of interacting, and I think that's going to be cultural. I think it's going to be dependent on the mediator. It depends on the party and the issue, and I don't think it's one size fits all at all. I think it's very situational and also emergent. So during the mediation, you want to be able to adapt what techniques you're using and what structure you're using, and some places you want to be very adaptive, other places you want to be very structured, and then I think that the sort of the last biggest question is how do we democratize mediation? How do we enable people to do more self-serve mediation? And so they can, maybe start a process and then call a mediator in if they're getting trouble with it, but they're following a structured process, or they're following a set of guidelines set up by mediators. And so I think there's an opportunity for people to do more of their own self-serve mediation. And so those are sort of the big questions. So I'm going to dive into it. The first one. So why dialogue and writing? I put some questions on this next slide. So in your individual cultures, why would you dialogue and why would you write? So anyone would like to sort of talk a little bit, maybe give some feedback and have a bit of a discussion?
Yeah, just raise your hand, virtual hand for sure, and you can just come in.
Vikram, do you want to start off while we're waiting for people to engage?
No, I was just actually going back to what you said, and culture playing a part in online mediation. That was something interesting. I think we need to look at that and maybe a little more in depth, I think, on that part.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
But
more on that?
I mean, I think we have to define what online mediation is, and I think there's going to be different cultural responses to being online, and I think as Ken said, that culture might come down to an individual in a particular situation, or it may be a broader cultural element.
So basically what you're looking at is how is online mediation developing in various parts of the world? I think that is the question. So we have people from all over. So I think maybe we can start with Argentina. Liliana, what do you think? How is online mediation developing in Argentina, and culturally, is there a difference you think?
Hi. Well, I was thinking about the question. So in my culture, why do we dialogue and why do we write? That is the question, right?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, in my culture, we are very talkative people. So we talk a lot, but I'm not sure if we dialogue. So in mediation, that's as a mediator, I am an attorney and a mediator here. That's what I learned in my training, and that's what I'm continue to learning and to explore in each mediation, because people says a lot, and here we are very expressive people. I don't know if you met any Argentinian people, probably you do.
My mother was Argentine. My mother's Argentine, so I have a good connection there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great.
So we be careful, Liliana, what you say. Be very careful.
Yes. Yes. So we are very expressive, and with our hands and with our faces. So, and we talk a lot. We like to talk, but dialogue is another thing. So, I think we dialogue in order to understand each other, because it's not the same to talk and to say a lot of things that to actually have a conversation with other person and to understand what that person is saying. So that's what happens or we try to encourage in mediation.
Yeah.
And I think why we write is probably to put those understandings, how can I say this? Like to have those understandings more correctly, more clearly, and to take that with you, so make people don't feel that words just are on the air, so they leave the mediation with something.
So it's like slowing down to take time to think and understand and to reflect and make it real.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't think that,
yes.
I think that's, for me, that's very true. So that's really good. Thank you.
Okay, so now let's get
Thank
the Italian experience of this. Giovanni, you want to give your...
I sent a message. Also, I remember. I was just remember the song "The Sound of Silence" by Simon Garfunkel. People talking without speaking, people hearing without listening. Also, in my country, and I think that Liliana, the grandparents of Liliana came from Italy. We like talking, sure.
Mhm.
And not always clear if we understand each other very well. And sometimes we need writing. I should prefer many times to write, also because I work in a bank. And so I remember that just to be understood, it was much better to write instead of speaking. I really couldn't understand exactly which are your purposes. Democratize ODR. How to open ODR to more people, or how more people can manage ODR? Because
So
I think that ODR is very well spread all over the world. So I think that it's not so difficult to democratize it.
Okay, so you're thinking that ODR is democratized already for for particular types of disputes or all disputes. Like in the corporate world, it's not a standard practice from my understanding of my experience. Maybe in your world it is. So that, I guess that's my background. My experience is that in disputes in corporate endeavors, internally, it's not generally used effectively anyway. So do you have other examples than that?
Because I think that the main concern now on ODR is the use of the smart contracts and ODR, and also the court all based on internet, as they done in China in 3 different towns. I think this is really the main concern, because otherwise every people can use ODR. Of course, if they are well trained.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is when Anant is coming in, Anant, you please want to.
Hey everyone. So I'm Anat and I'm from Israel. I'm also half Argentinian.
Oh my God, what are we doing here? What is all this?
I to refer to the question of why and when dialogue and why write. So I also, like Liliana said, I'm not sure my parties, I'm full-time mediator and facilitator. I'm not sure my parties dialogue a lot, to be honest. They converse, they vent, they are very talkative as well. They are very intense too. But dialogue with something emerging, of us really listening to each other, not thinking, not being reactive. I'm not sure it happens a lot in my mediation room, and I think it's typical to other mediation rooms in my country. But I think the question of when to dialogue or converse or talk and when to write is really important as a facilitator. And I use the writing in order to organize. I think a lot of time people need it. I like to use the metaphor of jazz. I mean, I think as a mediator or facilitator, I need to understand where we are in the form. It may look messy on the on the outside, but it actually, as the person in charge of the process, I like to think that I know where we are on the flow of the process, or like a typical flow is what you provided a few minutes ago, Martin. So yeah. I write when I think the issues need to be clarified, and just to make sure that I understand that these are the issues that we need to talk about. And when I was becoming a mediator in the beginning of my career, I didn't think it's that important, but now I realize that there are complex processes where it's very important to put it in writing. And regarding damages, regarding monetary issues, just to make sense of everything, to make sure we understand, we break all the elements. I found it during my career to be very helpful. I use a lot boxes too, very, very simple, but just to, I think that graphic helps people. It reduces anxiety. Perhaps it also reduces my anxiety. So definitely, as Liliana said, when we put the agreement in writing, but also during, just to make sense of all of it, because things become clearer. So I hope that kind of helps move this conversation.
I think it does. I think you're talking a little bit more about adding to the earlier points in terms of sort of talking about the flow between dialogue and writing, and when one is more appropriate than the other, because you're trying to, again, slow it down and visualize it and be able to structure the data a little bit more effectively and reflect it, and allows people to sort of mull over and accept it in a way that's and there's less pressure on trying to understand quickly and moving on to the next point. And you know, it's a bit like journaling in many ways. It's like you're learning something, and you're visualizing it. I think those are both really important things, especially when problem solving. Being able to. Maybe I could ask the question: when we're structuring a problem, how important is it to? Sorry. How important is it to be able to get contributions, written contributions from parties?
You can raise your virtual hand if you want to go next, or let's get Sanjeev in. Sanjeev, you want to? Sanjeev is out.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Vikram. Hi, Martin. I somehow made it. So
yeah. First of all, that part of it we're going to discuss separately. That why you could not find the Zoom link.
Well,
we're going to get to that. Yes, no, we won't. I want to get into it, but I won't right now.
No, absolutely. So
that could be a dispute.
We'll have a separate session for that. But yes, Martin, I also wanted to kind of have a quick view. My view to be shared with regards to your earlier questions about why dialogue and why writing. So, what is my experience is that, yes, I've heard other speakers telling that we speak a lot, or in our culture, people speak a lot. I somehow have a view that we think a lot. We don't speak as much. There's a lot of internal, the jugglery which keeps happening. But the moment we expect people to speak, a lot of people are not able to articulate what exactly they've been thinking. And the next level of clarity comes when they are forced to write, which means there is a level of filtration which happens. There's a lot of internal tug of war which happens in our minds most of the time when we are sitting as a party in a meeting, or even as a mediator. I'm hearing both the sides, and there's a lot of this action going with it. But the moment I have to speak, there is a lot of caution which kind of comes in. So then I have to use my words pretty carefully, and that is what we at times expect from the parties, which seldom happens. Because in a mediation, typical thing, we have emotions overtaking the rationale half of the time, most of the time. So we'll have to live with it. But yes, when you ask why writing, I think that to me is the most important aspect, because from one level of thinking to speaking and speaking to writing, the moment we talk about writing, I think people have to start thinking about the appropriate words as to what they were thinking, what they were saying, but how, when they have to reduce it to writing, that is where the challenge is in terms of the clarity. You get to understand how much clarity or how much, the mind of a particular person is clear in terms of his thought process. And that to me is very important. So to me, it's like, it's a filtration mechanism. You can think anything, but you start speaking and it gives a different notion, but you reduce that into writing, and when the other person reads, and then if he's not able to make sense, or if he's not able to get the message, what he was saying, what you're thinking, I think that's where the disconnect is. So to me, everything has its own place in our mechanism, how we interact, because being silent is of course a communication mechanism, right? Even in mediation, when we speak about body language, nobody has to utter a word. But the very fact that we are seeing each other, and we are seeing the body language, our eyes are really working 24 hours, and they are on the move, trying to assess, trying to read it differently. So communication modes, you think, your body language speaks, but then when you open your mouth, of course, somebody will be really smart to understand what you're saying, what you're not. And these things really make a difference when we talk about negotiation, for example. So negotiation piece, whenever I have been party to these kind of discussions, I have given, I would say, adequate weightage to people who are silent, to people who are speaking, and the moment we expect things to come in writing, of course, a lot of things change. So that's from my side, slightly a different perspective. But I really take everything as a mode of communication, and it makes a difference. It's a contribution. That's it.
That's really good. Very interesting. I like the concept of the different modes, including silence, dialogue, and writing, and how each one has a weakness and the others compensate together to create a pretty strong communication triad for communication. Very insightful. Yeah. Thank you.
Martin, Anubhav had to say something. He raised his hand. So, Anubhav, you want to say something?
Yeah, I sort of had a similar view from what Mr. Sanjeev just shared. And out of my little experience in mediations, being, I guess, the youngest one here out of all of the people, what I feel is listening is something for us Indians that doesn't come in always in mediations. And that is why writing becomes so very important for us when we are sitting in for a mediation. Because when we are talking, we want to talk and put forth our issues always. We want the other party to hear us, but we do not want to listen to what they want to say. And to listen it out, there comes in the role for a mediator, where ironing out the details onto what is being spoken out and what is being the interest and the positions for both of the parties, and making the parties realize that is something that is very important, where the part of writing comes in mediations.
But Anubhav, you have to be a little careful on this, very careful. Whenever you say the youngest, always you are not the youngest, the women are always the youngest, and you are just older than them, okay? Be very sure about this. Never say that. They are the youngest. Okay, now, but I think, okay, Martin, I think you take this and I'll then come.
Yeah, no, it was very insightful. And I have, it's very good. Well done for bringing the listen element into that. That was really, really important. Thank you.
So, but I was still going back to Martin on the aspect of the development of a culture of online mediation. We've been talking about culture of mediation in general. I've been talking about the development of that culture of online mediation. How much has it trickled down? I really want to get into that part. If there's something on that you have.
I don't have a lot to add on that at this point. So I haven't had a lot of broad experiences of different cultures working in mediation. So I was hoping that your audience could help with that element of it.
No, a little different from that, Martin. What I'm saying is that one is culture playing a part in mediation. That's a separate thing. But say in Canada, in terms of the development of a culture of online mediation, I mean, I'm more about the aspect of, is there a culture of online mediation which is developing, or these are just concepts that we discuss within ourselves, and what is happening on the outside in the world, what are they looking at? If there's something on that.
I'm not sure I could fully answer that question.
Look, on one end, we keep talking about
yeah.
mediation as mediation developing in the world, and mediation should be something that people should use. Now, similarly, on online mediation, is it something that only within mediators we are talking about online mediation, or is there a culture of online mediation developing in your part of the world? We can talk about other people, but what is your feel of the way people are looking at online mediation? Because you were wanting to concentrate on online aspect of it. That's why I'm asking you this question.
For sure. The what in conversations I've had with other mediators, what I've heard is that they were very resistant to online mediation, doing full online, and when it happened that they had to because of COVID. They got to it pretty quickly. They developed their the cameras and the techniques, and they learned pretty quickly. Zoom had this breakout ability, and they got to it, and it worked. There was a level of disconnection that they experienced, and there's a willingness to do online mediation, and at least have maybe a hybrid mediation models where some of it's online or most of it's online, and maybe some more difficult topics get dealt with in face to face if they need to, if that's possible. So that's my understanding of where things are with the mediators I'm talking to. Is that? Does that help answer your question?
No, that's okay. I mean, I was just wanting to understand on the perfect. I mean, please carry on.
Okay, Martin, can I just ask you something?
Sure, please.
Your emphasis on online mediation. Now, I just wanted to kind of, because of lately, of course, because of the COVID pandemic and social distancing, people not being able to travel. Now, this has just come up, right, as a means. Now, do you think that online mediation beyond a point, of course, as we say, life comes in packages. So if it's online mediation, it'll have the plus and the minuses, right? At times when you see people in flesh and blood, you're able to better read them. You are better able to read the body language. And then, on the other side, when it's a 2D through a Zoom, when you do it, you are at a distance, and there's no social connect from that perspective. So mediator is sitting elsewhere, party is sitting elsewhere. Even if you want to see the warmth and some emotions, which are very integral part of this entire mediation exercise. Now that's going to be missing, right? So to me, online mediation is just going to be an alternative, not a substitute. It's like a scenario, a pandemic forced us to explore, discover what else can be done, because disputes keep happening. Okay, and now we can't meet. Mediator will do what he's supposed to. Party will, again, reach out to them, but of course not in person. So do you think that there is a overemphasis on the terminology called online mediation? The point is, it's a mediation. The moment we are able to meet, we'll be happy. There'll be cases, there'll be situations whereby people will feel more comfortable sitting in person, thrashing it out, versus a scenario where you have more quantitative stuff, and some stuff where even if you're not meeting, you're bored, and then something kind of carries on. So online mediation to me, an alternative, not exactly 100% substitute. So that's like my take. I don't know. I mean, I'm not wanting to be, giving a very fresh perspective. It was more of my view, because we've been hearing a lot. A small query I have, on the last of the slide down below, you've written, have you journaled or kept a diary? Now, if I read it, because I can relate it to it. I write. I've been writing for so writing has to be defined. What exactly? Maintaining a diary is day's experience versus what happened during the day, what you wanted to do, stuff like that, or you really make notes. So if you think it's relevant, maybe I'll be happy to hear it from you, because I've been doing it for 25 years now.
Yeah. Right. So the reason I add, let me start with the last question first. the reason I wrote that was because I just wanted to reflect on why we would journal, what we're doing when we're journaling, what's the mental processes that we're going through when we're journaling, and how much learning was there from that journal process. Because I believe that was an indicator of something that happens in our brains when we are writing, and we're learning as we write about the situation that we're trying to explore. Sometimes, we're all, different people are different, but some people have concepts and they write them down, but other people sort of push out content, and that's sort of how they learn. And so there's this sort of different dynamic around writing, and that was what I was trying to bring out. And I think you make some good points about what I've heard about on good online mediation is that sometimes it's great because people who feel threatened by each other aren't physically together, so there's a safety factor in that. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is it's convenient. You can do it quickly. You don't have to organize a place. You don't have to organize. So an online mediation can happen really, really quickly, and often time is of essence. So it really has that huge benefit of being able to happen quickly. The distancing and disconnections, there's a lot of meeting science around that, and I've got a later slide that sort of talks to it, but it basically explains that you're losing a lot of the connectiveness, but I would disagree with the fact that you can't express emotions through online. I think we do that all the time. I think I've worked online in tough situations all globally for many years, and you get to know and you get to trust and you get to connect with people in a deep way, just as if they were in person. It's the same sort of connections, which in a short mediation you may not get. It's the variety of different ways we've connected and how much time we spent together and how much connection issues we've dealt with together. But whether it's online or offline, the beautiful process of mediation, when you get to solutions and people are creative and they find better solutions than they were expecting, there is a strong sense of connection. My screen is muted. Can you hear me? I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So
Martin, let me just tell you, if you wanted Anath to come here, it seems that she's been planted, because the question is, can Martin share an example of an online facilitation using the software he has developed? So basically, it seems that you have given her that question, but please answer it.
I didn't answer it, and I'd be very happy to show it. I didn't want to make this about technology. I wanted it to be about the different online facilitation tools that we want to be able to use. And but yeah, I would love to answer that question, but I'm not prepared to answer it in this session, if that's okay.
If you want to tell us something about it, why not, please?
Yeah, so it's a online facilitation tool that basically you do your own process design in it. You can design a set of questions. There's an interactive component that you can share, so you can do very much emergent conversations, and you flow the data from one activity to the next, so that if you, for instance, for storytelling and going through sort of issue generation, so you tell stories, and you could have a series of questions that somebody would prepare beforehand, or do it during, and those questions would then flow into and be shared together, and then you would dialogue that component with your mediator, or you could have that those questions just be an input for the mediator, and then have completely open and nothing shared at the beginning of the conversation. Then each person would share theirs. So it's a tool that you're able to design the flow that you want. It has the visualization tools for data, so you can get different people to enter different stuff as a set of ideas that are anonymously created, especially if that's more useful in multi-party. And then you can vote on things. So you could prioritize your list of issues that you want to discuss, so that you can, you're getting input from them. The meeting science shows that the more engagement you're getting if you compare brainstorming and brain writing, you get, with brain writing anonymously, you get approximately 60% more ideas. And you get twice the number of original ideas. So you're getting much more core input from people. So that's the tool, and it goes right. It covers all of these different processes here. So you can do a stakeholder input. You can set a set of rules that people would tick off. I'm abiding by these set of rules. You can dialogue. You can tell stories. You can have some self-reflecting questions like Byron Katie does the work, and it's sort of very self-inquiry type questions. So you can help people get on the right, emotionally on the right space to be able to negotiate, and you can use that with yourself as a mediator, or you could use it with between the parties. It's up to you and how you design that. And then there's abilities to take inputs from everybody, and when you take inputs from everybody, then you can group those ideas based on if they're similar ideas, or if there's a theme. You can classify them, and then you can vote on them, and you can generate better ideas. You can work together as a team to be able to organize that data and reflect on it and find different perspectives and bring clarity. Use your curiosity. It engages, because it's writing. There's elements of writing in there. You can engage the parties more deeply in the process of working with the data, and that's sort of the idea. And then we can process data all the way through. So ideas that came up in the agenda list can end up in the mutual agreement, right? So. Matt, does that answer your question?
Yep, it answers the question. Yeah, answers it.
Okay. So okay, I didn't. Thank you for asking it. I wasn't actually planning to cover it. I hope that helps. So the next sort of big question that I see is how much structure do we want in advance, and how much do we want to like have a plan and go through the plan and never go from it, or do we want to be completely emergent and not really have a plan, but just follow the information, follow the data that comes out? There's sort of two ways to approach it. And then I'm going to skip the next slide. Go to this slide. So if I can just, in the last 5 minutes, just talk a little bit about what I see as why now for the online mediation or the hybrid. And it's the fact that parties are in multiple locations. And the online mediators, going back to Sanjeev's point, I think that with online facilitation tools, a lot more can be done with online mediation. It doesn't, it's not meant to be a substitute, but I think can be even more effective in certain circumstances than online, than in face-to-face, because you've got this mix of synchronous and asynchronous activities, so things that can happen in different spaces and time. Then you've got these abilities to be able to facilitate a conversation around visualized data that people can manipulate themselves on the screen. We can use things like self-inquiry so people can reflect, which you could use in an online in a face-to-face situation, but you can do that in advance, and it's all linked together. It's all in one place. And then the power of the written word and the spoken word in combo with the listening and the silence. I think those combinations are pretty powerful and more possible in online situations where that's not. So in terms of meeting culture, I think people will develop how they work together in mediations in these forms and develop their own cultures. I don't think there is an online mediation culture yet, and that was what I thought. And you may disagree with me. So this is a little bit about the science that Joe Allen and many others have developed around meeting efficiencies, and what they talk about in terms of the sudden virtual is the disconnection, the lack of visual cues, the linear meetings that go on because people aren't working in parallel. And the tools are fairly limited at the moment for online facilitation. So the change in mindset, post-COVID, is that maybe it's hybrid meetings, maybe certain activities we decide in mediation, the longer ones it would need face-to-face and online mediation. Maybe meeting participants may become a luxury version of mediation. I don't know. Depends on situations and what's at stake. And then this is a little bit about why I was thinking dialogue and writing is an essential factor. So when we talk about there's a lot of studies that talk about the brain and hand action, and that is specifically to do with holding a pen and writing. But I think it always compares typing versus writing. In fact, I think typing also has the same set of benefits, not as much, but I couldn't find any studies to justify that point. But it's the visualization, it's the brain encoding the words as they come through your fingers. It's like accessing the deepest part of your brain. And then the visualization structure, I think we talked a lot about that. I think Byron Katie's quote is really good. Once the mind is stopped on paper, thoughts remain stable and inquiry can easily be applied. So I think that with online mediation, with facilitation tools in online mediation, I think there's more opportunities for voice and a higher contribution. And the science shows that the more people are engaged directly and contributing, that increases their self-worth. And I think that, and their feeling of value in the process. And I think that's it's a very critical point that Dr. Allen's making there. And then the shared note taking, that's the visualization, reinforcing, orientation. And that's and so once we've got those writings, then we can work with those writings, and we can then start to work that data and explore themes and explore ideas more effectively than because it's visual. It's more of a visual tool as well. So I'm hoping that makes sense. And yeah, I think that's sort of my last slide. I think at the moment, I'm gonna wrap it at that. Any questions?
Any questions for? You haven't planted any other questions, Martin?
I have not planted.
There was only one which was planted. Nothing else came out. But I'm telling you one thing on online mediation, the way I'm looking at it for India, because not too much has happened, at least in private mediation, nothing really. Of course, we have court annex mediation. But I'm thinking, like in India, we missed out that pager period. People had pagers in other parts of the world. Then mobile phones came in. We did not get that. We had a very short period when pagers came in, but mobile phones came in, so pagers didn't really do well. I'm thinking with mediation also, I'm just hoping that happens, that mediation only becomes an online mediation concept and we skip this whole physical mediation thing, because I think it can really spread and we need lots of mediation to happen, but we don't have that pool. So there'll be a pool of the people sitting in various parts. So just connecting them, I think online mediation might be the way forward. And I think it works well. So perfect.
That's a beautiful thought. It's like skipping the DOS. And going straight to Windows.
We skipped it. We skipped that whole. You'll be surprised. I mean, there were countries which used pages for 20 years, and we did not see that. So I'm saying that there are things that because people who use the pager, for them, they might discuss mobile phones and pagers and hybrid and how we can use them together. We skipped that. So maybe we will not be discussing that at all, because that background is not there. So for me, mediation is online mediation. Let's take it that way.
Yeah, and it's up to the tools to support that.
Exactly.
Right? So
So this
and creating our own culture within how we do that, and that's suitable for the people that are being served through it.
So Martin, all your apprehensions about 1 hour and how will I do this and everything was not required. You did perfect. We did our 1 hour. We've completed it.
I adapted my process for you a little bit. So thank you very much. And thank you for all the questions and all the interaction. That was good.
No, thank you very much, Martin, for coming in. And let me just ask everyone to unmute and they can thank you. They can say what they want to you, and then I'll cut them off. Please, you can thank Martin. You can say what you want. You get that.
Martin, you're very far ahead in comparison to me on these topics, but I think that many answers to your questions will depend on the future development of the efficacy of technology. If we have much better technology, the differences between talking and writing will be narrowed. So I think that better connections will make everything easier.
Your Honor, that's very insightful. Thank you.
But Isaac, you had nothing to ask, Martin? Isaac is sitting in Ghana. Yeah.
I came in late, so.
Okay, so you don't get
nothing
to ask
for now.
anything.
Yes, nothing for now. Yeah.
But how is online mediation going on in Ghana? Is there things happening there?
Online mediation has not actually something that a lot of people are looking at in Ghana because of connectivity in the country. So depending on how people will be able to connect, but they do it with external organization through, especially during the COVID, when the government has to do arbitration outside the country. That is what we got to know, that there's a lot of things going on within the online mediation and arbitration as well. But it has not been something that we have looked at in the country, though, for now.
And Isaac gets to speak so much only because he's such an enthusiastic person. He's gone out, done a survey. I sent that form also that he had sent out. So that's why he gets to speak so much. Otherwise, everyone stays mute otherwise.
I saw the survey. It's great.
Okay.